Dr. Short. It's not working. Good morning. So is the camera pointing where we want it to point?
Yes, I can see.
And you got it all. So if I touch something, you're going to be a little annoyed with me. Is that correct? Well, welcome to 2022. Man, you know, that really amazes me. Some of you are closer in age to me, but I'm probably the most vintage person here. And just thinking 2022 is something that is hard for me to realize. And we were cleaning out some things. You know how we're going to rearrange, and when you get to my vintage and my husband's vintage, you really start thinking about downsizing and getting rid of it. So when we were putting the Christmas decorations up, I said, I want you to pull something. We're going to have 2 containers, and we're going to either use them or we're not, instead of them sitting up there forever. And he pulled something down, and we had these, we would have called them LPs. And I had a record player. I had a stereo back then. My daughter, about a year or so ago, got a vinyl player because she thought that was really cool. And I'm thinking, first of all, I said, a vinyl? What's a vinyl? And so she has maybe 1 or 2 albums, and we pulled down. I was a huge fan of the Carpenters. So just so you know, I have several vinyls of the Carpenters. I was a huge fan, still am. Actually was, I should say I am, right? Alabama. This tells you a little bit about the different kinds of music I listen to. So I have several Alabama. And then CDB, Charlie Daniels Band, have a vinyl of that. And then I also had Jim Croce. And so I thought, I'm going to wrap these up for Katie and see if she can enjoy those in the same way that I did. But one of Jim Croce's songs was Time in a Bottle. And I'm thinking, wow, what has happened to that bottle, right? Because time has really flown by. At the same time, it has been dragging its feet during this pandemic. And it has been challenging for everyone. And when you all see emails from me, or when you hear me say, I'm really impressed with everything you've done, I really, really, really mean that. That doesn't mean that we don't have things that we need to work on. And it doesn't mean that every day things go exactly like we would like for them to. But I know how this college has continued to try to work to serve the community, to serve students, and to support each other. And I will tell you, I have an opportunity to, when new folks come on board, if the schedule works, Alex or Kelly, somebody will bring them by just to meet me, because we're so spread out. It's hard to see people. And one of the things I say, you will find that people here are very supportive and very friendly. And I believe that, but I kind of want to tell them. But almost every single time, the individuals say, yeah, I've already seen that. Right? They've only been with us a little time, and they've already seen that. So you heard me say with in our PD day, you heard me talk about, we're going to shift our culture some to do and accomplish what we want to accomplish with the support of the Title III. It is a bit of a shift. It's not a shift in our belief, but the shift will be in how we recognize that we've got to change to do what we've always talked about doing. So if you think the town hall prior to Professional Development Day, I spent a whole lot of time talking about, in the past, here's what we focused on. And I even gave you slides that were generated. I don't know if you realize that they were generated many years ago. because you know I'm a recycled employee, and since we have our Google Drive, I still have the drive where I had all of my slides and presentations before. So I actually pulled slides from what we had shared in the past about how we recognized the support for students has to be holistic, and how we've got to engage them really early on, as in the first time a student connects with us, there needs to be a connection, and there needs to be the building of a relationship. And so we'll be talking a whole lot about that holistic support. But don't ever mistake that what happens in the classroom is a lesser priority, or that we believe that it's a lesser priority. Because when we talk about the holistic support that's necessary, that is so that what happens in the classroom can happen in the most effective way. And when students experience our college, now there are times when you will hear them say, you know, what they remember is the individual that helped them, and that may or may not be a classroom instructor. And I'm using the word classroom for every kind of delivery that we have. All right, but so you may hear them say that, but I will tell you, students most remember what happens for them and with them in the classroom setting. And so understanding how to continue to engage as our world has changed, and as our students with all of their multiple priorities have changed, is critically important. And I know what I'm talking about in terms of the engagement in the classroom, and I'll tell you why. About a week or so ago, I was my daughter and my husband and my daughter's fiance and I were out, and we were taking care of some business in Harnett County. And it was my daughter and her fiance's business, and Jeff and I were just kind of there with them, right? So I didn't introduce myself today. I'm Lisa Chapman. I'm the president at CCCC, and you will hear me. I typically say I'm your president, right? Because I want people to understand that it's my job to help you do what you do. But so I'm the president at the college. Over the years, I could have introduced myself as a dean at the college, as a department chair at the college, as a lead instructor, or as an instructor. It's been a while since I taught any of our classes. I did teach when I was in Christy's role. I did teach, not usually maybe a class a semester, but that's been several years. It's been a lot of years since I was a full-time instructor. A lot of years. I'm the president. I've been back here 3 years. We're in Harnett County. We're doing business for my daughter and her fiance. And the individual that's helping us is looking and says, Lisa Chapman, you were my instructor. She didn't say, Lisa Chapman, you're president at CCC. She didn't give a flying fig, didn't even know that, right? Didn't know I was dean, Christy, didn't know I was executive VP. What she knew is I was her teacher. And in fact, I don't think she said instructor. You know, we tend to use the word instructor. I think she said, you were my teacher. Now the other part, and I'll share this with Jessica and Jennifer and Scott, some of my science buddies, because here's what Katie said, of course. She's lived with that forever and a day, right, in our community. And the person responded quickly. She said, I liked her class so much, I took it twice. That may be a story for another day. But the point is, what happens in the classroom is so important and matters so much to our students. And so I'm very excited about what we will get to hear today. I know the panelists, and I know Scott's getting ready to moderate and introduce them, but I've met them all and engaged with them all in many different ways over the years, and I've learned from them. And I appreciate the fact that there's an opportunity here just to kind of share and dialogue with how you connect with the students. Because I will tell you that first class that I taught, and this individual wasn't in the class, it'd been about 24 years since she had had my class. The second time, I guess, I don't know. But the first class I taught, I did a horrible job. I was nervous. I came to work on Monday, taught my first class on Wednesday, had never taught before. There was nobody that on the campus that taught biology. And so what I did was I read the chapter, I made lots of notes, and then I walked into the class and I turned around and I wrote on the board a lot. But then what happened is I had some really wonderful, mature students who said, we need some additional help. And they started engaging with me outside of the classroom, and that's where the learning started to happen. And that's where I learned how to be a teacher. So my students really helped me understand that. So I want you to know, first of all, how much I appreciate everything you do, everything the college means to this community. And when I say that, I really mean it. And when I say there are things I want us to improve on, I really mean that too. But I do want you to know how much I appreciate all that you do. And even though we're going to focus a lot on our advising and our onboarding and really ensuring that the engagement with our students is as seamless as we have always wanted it to be, because we've said we have all the pieces, never doubt that all of us know how important what happens in the classroom really is. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott, and Jairo was going to be here to introduce him. I have the honor, and now he's wondering whether or not it's an honor for him because he doesn't know what I might say. Scott and I have known each other a number of years. When he was teaching at the Harnett campus and I was based here in Lee, we would get on the phone and guaranteed his wife and my husband, if it was the end of the day, they would know that we had been talking to each other, because that conversation would go on quite some time, because there was so much to think about and learn, and so much I appreciated from learning with him. You may have seen the email. I don't know, because the portal was down. Some people saw emails and some people didn't see emails yesterday, but I had the opportunity to announce Scott as our new AVP of onboarding and advising. And I'm not sure that I want a title that would flow. However, that does represent what we really want to work on. We have been working on, Scott has been working on for a number of years, since before I came back. Certainly our QEP has been focused on that. I was at the system office watching presentations. This college gets it, and now we have an opportunity to take what we know and really move forward, and Scott is the perfect leader to help us with that, and we've got the right team that's going to support him. So with that, I won't go any further, Scott. I'll turn it over to you, and again, thank you guys for all you do.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I wasn't quite sure what you was going to say, so I really am glad we have this time to talk about teaching, because we don't have many chances to reflect on what we do and how we impact students in the classroom. And so I'm grateful to be involved today and to have this chance to moderate this session with three exceptional instructors. Let me give you some introductions, and then we will jump right into some questions here. Jennifer Brown, who you see on the monitors there, is from Lumberton, North Carolina. She began her teaching career in 1999 with the public schools of Robeson at Red Springs High School and joined the faculty of Robeson Community College in 2005. She has been an adjunct instructor for us as recently as this past summer. She was selected as the RCC Instructor of the Year in 2013 and won the R.J. Reynolds Excellence in Teaching Award in January 2014. In her free time, Jennifer enjoys spending time with her children, Paige and Landon, and serving at the Smyrna Baptist Church. So thank you, Jennifer, for being here. Ginger Harris is from Siler City. She began working in the field of education in 1999 and joined the faculty of CCCC in 2006. She was selected as the CCCC Instructor of the Year in 2018 and won the R.J. Reynolds Excellence in Teaching Award in January 2019. In her free time, Ginger enjoys spending time with her family, traveling, and serving the community in different organizations. And Jessica Brown began her tenure at CCCC in 2001 and has been a full-time instructor here since 2011 and has taught seated, hybrid, distance, you name it, she's taught it. She won the CCCC Instructor of the Year award and the state award in 2008. She lives on a working farm where she and her family raise organic pullets and have a herd of brood cows. She loves to trail ride with her family, and she's an avid eventer. So thank you for being here, panelists, and I'm hoping that we'll have a good conversation today. Erin is monitoring the chat, so if you have questions that you would like us to pose as time permits, please put those in. But we'll just want to start off with Jennifer and actually for all of our panelists, starting with this question. Today we're talking about building relationships to create a student-centered classroom. So just as a way of getting our conversation started, why do each of you think that building relationships makes teaching and learning more effective in your classroom? Jennifer, would you like to start?
Scott, tell her to unmute.
You need to unmute Jennifer. I think you're muted.
There we go. Now, sorry about that. You know, actually during my transition from public schools of Robeson County to RCC, there was a time that I was actually going to be going to the early college. And one of the foundations of early college was rigor, relevance, and relationships. But I found over the years, but if you kindly change the order of those relationships with students first, that the relevance and rigor will come along with that. When you let students know you care and build those relationships to engage them in class, then the rigor will take care of itself, the relevance will take care of itself as well.
I'll just jump in. I've been here long enough that we have went through lots of different types of advising here at the college and lots of trainings from that. So the one thing that I've kind of taken away that all of them have in common is building relationships and being personal and sharing a little bit about yourself with students. If you want students to connect with you and to help in that area, you have to kind of jump in there and share a little bit about you, which helps you kind of bond, and that bonding experience is really what gets them involved in the classroom. You know, it's kind of like with your friends, right? If you want people to do things, you have to be willing to give a part of yourself. And so I think it's the same way with that relationship. Once you have that started in the classroom, students will do what you expect of them. They'll rise to that challenge that you give them, but that relationship has to be there.
And I'll finish up echoing everything that they've said so far, that it is the relationships that matter. The students can tell when you are invested in them. And as they've said, when you set the bar high, if you have them on your team, they're going to work even harder for you by doing that. It is sharing anecdotes with your students. It is being a person and letting them know that you're a person. And we say this sometimes, you also have to tell them the uncomfortable parts when you make mistakes. They really sometimes will give you more credit when you openly admit that you have made a mistake or graded something wrong. I'm a biologist. I teach biology because there is very limited math in biology. And I will honestly tell the students, if I have made a mistake in calculating your grade, come to me. I will own up to my mistake. I tell them that it is their bonus, that I will never take points back. If I owe you points, I'll give them to you. But if I messed up the math in your favor, you just be glad that I'm not teaching chemistry or something like that. But I do think that something that we sometimes gloss over is being human with our students and admitting to our mistakes, admitting when we don't know something. A student will ask me something in A&P about some obscure disease that I don't know anything about, and I could fumble my way through it, or I could tell them, hey, I don't know, but let's talk about the process. I'll find that out and I'll come back to you. So I really think, as Ginger has said, making yourself human. When you do mess up, admitting to your mistakes and letting them know that it's a safe spot where they can also make mistakes as well, that there is no challenge in that particular part, I think is important in building those relationships.
Great, thank you. Ginger, we'll start with you on this one. Many studies have shown that the simple act of learning students' names is perhaps the most important step toward building a relationship in the classroom. How do you learn names, and what's this challenge look like for online classes?
So I think both seated and online, and one of the challenges I think when you're teaching multiple classes and having multiple students to name. So for me, is to learn something personal about that student. When we do introductions, even through online, is to try to find a way to connect with that student, to see if we have something in common or just something that stands out about that student. And it's certainly sometimes easier when they're face to face. So in the online, getting them to share a picture of themselves so that you can start to make that connection.
Jessica?
I will admit this is a Dr. Powell hangover for me with the learning the names. I knew all of my students' names, but it was not something I did in the classroom to call a student's name. And he, I don't want to say got on me, really encouraged me to change my practice. And it was uncomfortable because it was not my style. But once I saw with the students, when I did call their specific name, how much they responded to that, I told them, y'all, I'm learning. This is uncomfortable for me because it's not a flow yet. Now, once it was a flow, I do that all the time now, but it was not something that I consciously did. This past semester at one table, I had Mariah, Maya, Megan, and Maddie, and how they ended up at one table. And I told them it made a challenge because I called them by M&Ms and made a joke out of it and said to them, I am going to learn your names, but you got to give me a little bit of grace with all of you M's at one particular table. And I do make it, I guess, a game that when I hand back for my seated class their first test, I cannot call their names other than when I hand their test, I have to hand them to it. And I tell them they get to grade me at that point in time. And so I really go around the first couple of weeks in a seated class and I ask them how to pronounce their names. I don't shorten names. If it is a very hard, challenging name, I ask the student to, again, give me a little grace and repeat it. And I don't, if it is a hard name, shorten it, because I don't like when people shorten my name to certain names. And so I really try and give that to the student, that this is their name and they mean something to me, and that's why I learned their particular given name.
Jennifer?
And I guess this is a carryover for me from public schools. I have always learned students' names. And sometimes I guess things are kind of easier for us in a science class sometimes, especially in a laboratory setting. So it's okay for you all to make cheat sheets of names. When I have them at their lab groups, I have students to introduce themselves to each other in their lab group. And I'll go around from lab table to lab table, kind of chat with students. At a minimum, I want to know your name, your intended major, and what four-year college you plan to go to, because I teach a lot of college transfer students. And so, I mean, that's just one of my things. I have always tried to learn names in my face-to-face classes. Now carry that over to online classes. To me, it's still important to give students their name recognition in an online class. I always start off an online class with an introduction form. I'll make a video of myself so they can put a name with a face. And I have students to do an introduction form, again, asking them to share their name, intended major, what they plan to do at a four-year college, and any other personal information they want to share. And if they're willing to upload a photo for me, to please do that. And just to give you an example of why it even matters in an online class to try to put names and faces together, I was at a craft store over Christmas break. I noticed the young lady's name tag and that she had on a Lumberton High School FFA shirt. And I was like, hey, she still didn't recognize me at first. Then when she heard me start talking, as you all can tell, you probably tell I have a quite distinct accent. And we both recognized each other. She's like, hey, you're Miss Brown. And I was like, hey, you're Tyler in my online class. And I saw your article in the newspaper recently about some accomplishments she had made in her FFA program at the high school. So those things are important still. Some of my high school students, when I've seen they did well in athletic events, those CCP students, I can shoot them an email real quick. Hey, saw your name in the newspaper that you did well during the game. And I've actually been to some of their high school athletic events. So things like that, name and face matter. I'd encourage that even in an online class.
Great, thank you. Jessica, we'll start with you on this one. When we think about relationships, there's also relationships among students in class. So how do you build that community of learners and build those relationships with students in a seated class and also in an online class?
I think one of the great things about teaching at a community college is the diversity that you have in your class every single semester. And I love to see the interactions between very tech-savvy teenagers and a student who is returning who may not be quite as tech-savvy, to be able to then see that, I will say, what did you say, vintage individual, be able to then impart some worldly wisdom to that young teenager who doesn't have it. Those are the coolest relationships that I get to see form. And so I really try hard to encourage those. I don't do, in my seated classes, I do not do assigned seating because I find that they will shake themselves out in a really cool groups and ways to be able to do. But you have to get them talking. You have to give them something. And I just tell them, I said, yep, this is the intro. It's uncomfortable. We don't like to do this. But these, especially in the science classes, a lot of times those students are together a lot with a group, and then some of our A&P students go on to nursing, and those relationships and study groups that they form at that point in time will help carry them through the nursing program and things like that. So you have to be able to give them time to form those. I'm very much a type A individual who likes lots of control, and it's very hard for me to turn that control over to my students, and I have had to work very hard on stepping back and letting them make the connections versus me trying to force it. And it's hard when you want to control a conversation and make sure that they get everything, but I find organically by doing that, then it allows those connections to be made. In my online class, I'll echo what Jennifer also said. I do an introduction where I have the students do an introductory blog post. I don't require them to put a photo of themselves up, but if they want to put up a hobby or a common interest, then you start to see them, and I don't require a number of responses, but they start to interact and say, oh, I also love so-and-so, or I like to do this, and it still gives them that community online as well to be able to fall back on. So if you're not doing that as part of your introduction, that is a good way to foster an online community in your courses.
Jennifer, how do you foster community with seated students and online students?
I think, again, I'm going to kind of piggyback off of what Jessica said as well. We have to give time and opportunity for those types of relationships and communication and opportunities to take place. Again, I think sometimes it's easier in the classroom, face-to-face setting. And again, I say we're at advantage with our science laboratory groups that they really have an opportunity to engage with one another and for us to provide feedback, communication. I'm very much the face-to-face person. We can tell a lot by body language, facial expressions to know how to modify instruction. You don't always have that advantage in an online class. That's why it's so important to create types of assignments and types of opportunities and to provide feedback. Just giving a grade is not feedback. We need to still have those same engagement types activities. If they got something incorrect, why? Reinforce concepts. Perhaps it means go back and reteaching. But if we don't create the types of activities, time, and opportunities for students, even in an online environment to do that, then you're simply not going to have it.
I'll just echo a lot of what they've already said. So one thing that is different is probably the area that I teach in. So I teach in the education department. So my students are typically together for the full day. So I have found that if we can start at the beginning of, especially in the fall when they kind of come in as a cohort to move through, to really do some icebreaker activities that help them share, common interests there. Typically they're together in classes for the full day, so they probably a little bit quicker than in UT, they build those relationships because they are together and kind of get to see that. But one of the things that I do also in some of the classes is create specific activities that I'll say strongly encourage them to share some of the things that may not be as comfortable as just in general conversation. And I have found that really brings them together as like a family. And they support each other through their college experience here, and it really just brings us closer as a group there. And then online, just very similar, just in those open and discussion boards and forums, just sharing as much as you can get onto.
Great, thank you. Jennifer, I want to direct this one to you. You've been recognized for creating high levels of student engagement through hands-on learning. How has the pandemic impacted that in both your seated classes as well as online and hybrid classes?
Definitely has had an impact. And just to give you all a little bit of background here in Robeson County, even before the pandemic, in 2016 and 2018, our whole area was flooded. We were in those areas where Hurricanes Matthew and Hurricane Florence just devastated the area. So I'd say really going back since 2016, we've really had some tough challenges with education and students being out of school, back in school. And especially in our science, again, I can't keep harping on, I guess because my experience is in science, but with all of our classes, the transition to online was definitely a challenging aspect. When I'm kind of like Jessica, if I have students in class, I see them, I feel like I have control, I can make sure everything's going okay. And when you lose that, you feel like you don't have as much control. Something I've learned over the years, one of my former department chairs said, I don't have to say it for students to learn it. And so when I've been able to provide activities and things like that, where I don't have as much control, that doesn't mean that students are not still learning and have the ability and capability to learn. Again, the lab component was something that was very challenging. Here at Robeson, prior pandemic, we weren't big fans of online science classes. However, we know that's really not an option now. And so some of the things we have done to still so that we have those students hands-on, we haven't went to everything just virtual type labs. At any time we can do activities where students still have something to do at home, hands-on. Sometimes we've used kits, some open educational resources we've been able to utilize. And again, going back to some of the photos and videos in online classes, when you can have students to upload videos of them doing the labs or certain aspects of the lab you want them to share or explain, those are opportunities again for you to engage with students.
Great, thank you. One question I really want to pose to all the panelists, one that I think all of us have struggled with from time to time, is working with the unmotivated student. So do you have any particular strategies, whether it's leveraging relationships or other strategies that you want to use or talk about to help students who are not motivated find some motivation? So Ginger, we'll start with you.
So I think, to begin with, a lack of motivation usually comes from feeling like they're unsupported or that they're not being challenged or believe, that someone's not there to believe in them. So for me, it's kind of getting to the bottom of what they're missing, or is it something that is going on at home that's taken away, that their mind is so wrapped up in that they can't focus on their schoolwork, and trying to help build that support system there. So for me, I think it's just kind of really getting to know the student and know what's going on that's causing that lack of motivation there.
Jessica?
I'll echo that, that this is where the relationship part comes in, where you can cash in on the relationship that you have built with the students, if it's there, to help to motivate them. They do not always want to be unmotivated. Sometimes what may come across to us as unmotivated is the fact that they are trying to manage multiple aspects of their life. They may not know how to study well. They may not have the tools that they need to be able to be successful, and really investing in that relationship and digging into what is the root cause of no motivation. Is it the fact that they're hungry? Is it the fact that they're more concerned that they don't know X, Y, and Z that will happen with their kids? They don't know where they may be living in 2 or 3 weeks. I think that unmotivation sometimes can be a student who doesn't want to do the work, but I do think sometimes we have to capitalize on relationships and make sure that we can use the services of the college to make sure everything else is in place for that student, so that they can then succeed in your course. And that's showing the student that you are invested in them, not just giving them the information that they need to be able to get out of that class.
Jennifer?
And echoing that about student success, and again, I've got to be careful. I'm sorry if I haven't been trying to make my things relatable to all courses. Find that one assignment or activity early on that provides every student the opportunity to experience success. Sometimes that's that one thing that can help motivate an unmotivated student to experience success. And again, this goes back to what I said earlier about the relationships and about relevance. If you know a little bit about each of your students, and you can find something that unmotivated student may find relevant, then from there, I think that's a big spark that could help move things along.
All right, great. Jessica, I want to direct this one to you. Students have said that you bring, quote, a joy to learning. Do you have any advice for finding or keeping that joy when instructors are experiencing burnout or finding themselves in a rut?
Oh, I think we're all there after the last 2 years. Finding joy sometimes can be a struggle. We hear this all the time about the fact that you cannot pour from an empty cup. And I think that that is especially true for teaching and building relationships. My biggest thing is to have something that you can fill your own cup with. If you know me within, I won't say 15 or 20 minutes, but if you know me within 2 days, you will very quickly know that I have one thing outside of my teaching that I adore. which is horses. And I find that that allows me to step away from my job and fill my own cup so that I can return to my students and be able to do that as well. Being intentional in the classroom allows me to focus on my students, to focus on what I'm teaching and what I'm doing, but it also allows me to have something else so that I can bring that joy to them. Now, sometimes it's easy to find something, sometimes it's not, especially in a pandemic. But I think the students truly see that if you have joy, you have something that you can bring that into your teaching. Also, I love what I teach, and I think that that comes across to the students because I find joy in it. I am a confessed science nerd, and they embrace my nerdiness, and I take that with me and enjoy being able to make those connections. And we keep saying it's the relationships, but that's really what it comes down to, so that your students know that you care about them.
One thing that we are always talking about, and I'm glad that Erin has helped sponsor this session, is how do we grow as instructors? How do we continue to grow and continue to develop our skills? So, Ginger, let's start with you. How do you identify things to work on as an instructor, and maybe what's something you're working on now, trying to improve?
So I think that for me personally, one of the things that just during the pandemic and everything is really just the challenge of keeping up with all the technology is as fast as it's coming out. We have moved to use and collaborate a lot with our students in both seated and online courses to just try to find ways to meet all of their needs with everything that's going on, and finding ways to reach students more on that personal level with technology. So for me, it's just staying on top of that, keeping up to date and current on everything that's available and making sure that we're using what meets our students' needs the most. And I think the first step is just owning that we all have a weakness in something, that we all have a challenge. We can't be good at everything, and just owning that and working on, what you know is your weakness.
Jennifer.
And I think with this, you really have to be a reflective practitioner, practice self-evaluation on yourself. We all know when something works or when it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, hey, what can you do to change it and move forward? One thing too, and I guess I'm speaking more of this in our online work that we're all having to do now, and I don't see the online's just going to increase, it's not going to go away, is to not get stuck in a rut, not to have kind of what I kind of quote like the canned products. I'm all about resources. I'm all about some of the programs and things that textbook companies now offer for the online format. But at the same time, we need to be engaged in the online classes as faculty. Here sometimes we hear about students engaging. We have to engage too. And yeah, and we know our weaknesses as well. I mean, me with technology, I'm not the best with technology. And lo and behold, there's a lot of things I've had to learn quickly over the past couple of years. So just know nobody's perfect. We're always going to have an opportunity to grow and learn, even as faculty members. So,
Jessica, how do you identify things to work on, and what's something you're working on?
I think one of the most underrated things that a former boss of mine made us all do was we had to go and observe other instructors. We think of as instructors as observations as being punitive, or that somebody's going to come find something wrong. And my dean and department chair made it very normal for us as instructors to go sit in other people's classes and see. I learn something every single time I go to somebody else's class, and I take something from them. rubrics in the online class. I was like, "God, I'm not using a rubric. That's so much work. I don't like those." And I saw another instructor using them, and they totally changed my life and basically the whole department because I sang the praises of that. I think that we should normalize having people, other instructors in our classrooms, and learning from the wealth of faculty that we have here at CCCC who do truly care about their students and the relationships that they build and in there. One thing that I'm working on that I've already told y'all about is the fact that I'm a really good lecturer, and I can stand up there and control the classroom and get that information across, and really turning it over to the students more, to put more emphasis on them learning things where I don't have that control is hard for me. But I was very honest with a couple of my classes coming back from the pandemic that, you know, we're going to do things a little differently. You're going to have to do this stuff outside of class to be able to make what we come into class work better. And I had to let them fail a couple of times and not be prepared so that things didn't go as well. And they're like, oh yeah, no, maybe we should do that before we come in. So that's what I am personally working on. I am working on learning from the people that I work with because they have great ideas on how to do things. So I would love to normalize having instructors in classrooms and learning from other instructors.
Right.
Ginger, let me address this one to you. Both colleagues and students have recognized your ability to serve students with very diverse needs and guide them to success. So what advice do you have for instructors who may be struggling with or trying to learn how to form relationships with students who come from a variety of backgrounds?
So I think it goes back to that relationship part. It's really just kind of opening up to them, finding the things that you have in common, because even someone who is, you know, extremely diverse from you, there's certain things you have in common. Just finding those common denominators that you can share and agree upon and talk about. For me, one of the things that I talk a lot about in my classes is just owning your own bias that you have. I think we all have them, and to say you don't is, you know, you're trying to overlook something. But I think that, you know, that for me, and I tell my students, because my students are going out to work with diverse populations, it's just, you know, owning your own feelings and beliefs and thoughts and realizing that they are not the same as everyone. But the key is that in those moments when you're with people that you realize that's your own thoughts and your own beliefs, and that you don't bring them to the table when you're working with other people, and just really kind of, like I said, getting on that relationship there with them and creating that.
Great. I do have one final question, but then I also want to invite the audience here and the audience online, if they have questions, to please, you've got a chance to pose questions to some experts, so please take that chance. But I'd like to end my questions with this one, and we'll start with Jennifer. What's one thing that you've learned about teaching or education or students since your career started that you think that you want to share with other instructors, particularly newer instructors?
I kind of say this sometimes: the more things change, the more they stay the same. If you keep what is in the best interest of students at the forefront, whether it's in the classroom, outside of the classroom, that will never change what's in the best interest of students. And also for new instructors, people starting out, you all can't see it from there, but I have a lapel pin that I've had now for probably about 18 years. That's the one thing I've managed to keep up with and not lose over the years. It says, "Who I am makes a difference." Not who you are, but who I am. What I do makes a difference in the classroom, outside of the classroom, at home, in my community. You have to take care of yourself as well. It's important to take care of students, but number one, realize that in order for you to do the best job you can do, you have to take care of yourself as well and find that work-life balance. And again, never forget that who I am makes a difference.
Jessica.
I'm going to echo the whole thing of the building the relationships. Not only relationships, we focused on instructors to students, but as instructors here, the relationships that you make with other instructors is invaluable in helping you to be able to pull from their knowledge, to also bounce things off of. Pre-pandemic on our hall upstairs, it was really nice to be able to go to another biology instructor and say, hey, look, I'm thinking about asking this question on the exam. What do you think? And getting that particular feedback. I think we talked about learning communities for a little while here, and while those started to get off the ground, I think learning communities are important because there's a lot of other ideas, of other ways that we can support instructors. And for the new instructors, it's not going to be perfect. I go back to that very first class that I taught, and I'm horrified, those poor students who then will come back and say something about my course. Always be working on something. I'm known, again, by my dean and department chair that I never left a class alone because nothing ever went perfectly the whole entire time. And I said earlier, owning your mistakes. Students know you're human, and I think that they like to know that you're human as well. So it's okay to mess up, and to build those relationships with the students will make all the difference in the classroom.
Ginger, advice.
I mean, just remember that you're going to grow the whole time. You're going to learn things. You're going to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to fail. You know, you're going to go in and have classes that you walk out of and you feel like nothing was accomplished or nothing went right, and that's okay. I think to just keep growing. You know, you're going to keep learning. You're going to keep learning new skill sets. And as an educator, you know, you've never mastered everything, right? We keep learning as well. So, you know, and just remember that with all that growth is going to come change, and just kind of organically let that take place. I think the longer you teach, the more comfortable you get, and the more, you know, you feel comfortable just making those spontaneous last minute changes when something's not going right in the middle of class. You just switch gears, but it just comes with time and patience.
I think we sometimes are reticent to take risks in classrooms. We don't want to try new things because we get comfortable. And I like what you said, that sometimes we're going to have to accept that things are not going to work, and that's part of our growing process. Any questions from the audience here? Anything that you would like to ask? Okay, Erin, do we have anything coming in online that we want to address?
Not yet.
Okay. Give people just a minute or two longer. If you have any questions at all for Jennifer, Jessica, or Ginger, please, this is your chance. Ask them something hard. I was easy on them.
So when you're teaching classes online, face-to-face, hybrid, and you encounter students where you feel like they're falling behind, or maybe they didn't come to class for a couple of times, what have you found is the best technique to try to build that relationship back, to find out maybe what's going on, and take the right track?
Yeah, just to repeat for our online folks, Jamie's asking about how do you help students who are falling behind? How do you get them back on track when they are slowly falling behind in seated or online classes? Jennifer, you want to start?
Again, I always encourage students to take advantage of the resources that the college offers. Sometimes I think they forget that we are a resource outside of the classroom too. Our learning center, our academic centers there as well to help students. But I think sometimes what you mentioned, that students need to sometimes have it pointed out to them they're falling behind. I think sometimes sometimes I'll have students who don't even really check grades, I think. And so it's important, I think, sometimes if you just point out to students that they are falling behind, that even just that simple act helps to kick them in gear a little bit to like, hey, I need to get help. And then you can start pointing them in the direction of the academic resources available to them.
Ginger?
I think just reaching out to them, whenever you see it, whether it's through a phone conversation or sending an email, or if they're on campus, if you can just grab them for a second and just have those conversations. Sometimes, especially if the relationship is in place, then a lot of times they'll open up and share with you what's been going on. Or sometimes it'll just, they'll respond with that information. And, I try to really use our success coaches and making that in addition to personally reaching out to them.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing, echoing, a lot of times students are juggling lots of different things and helping them. I find some of our students don't know how to efficiently study, that sometimes the falling behind comes from the fact that they don't know how to study. And to us in education, that seems kind of counterintuitive. How do you not know how to study? And then I find that helping them manage their time to be able to study well can help them get back on track. And we want to think that it's utopia and perfect and it's flowery. Sometimes you have to have a really hard conversation with a student. Is this the correct time for you? Is this where you need to be focusing? Do we need to get X, Y, and Z in place right now? Which means dropping this course to then let's have a plan to be able to do it. We all would like to think that we're the best and we make it all perfect, and sometimes it's not that time for that student. And it's really hard to have those conversations, but when having those conversations, to have compassion for that particular student. I think sometimes by saying maybe now's not the right time, you set them up for better success in a future semester. And you didn't fail that student. That student did not fail. They may have had life fail them at that moment, but we can still set them up for success later.
Looks like Amy has a question online.
Yes, I've got a question. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm really curious, what is the learning or active learning activity that you all do in your classes that make your students come most alive? So they're most excited about, they're most connected to you, to each other. I'm just curious about that.
Okay, most engaging activity.
I'll go ahead and start. This again is science-based, but it can be transferred to a lot of the classrooms, and it's relatively cheap fix. We have chalk markers, and starting out, because they don't want to talk, they don't want to do anything, the chalk markers giving them an assignment where they write on the desks, because students also are breaking the rules then because they're getting to write on the desks to be able to do. But as simple as it sounds, having them engage and do that gets them talking to each other, then gives you the opportunity to come up and talk to them. And I jokingly say it's the teacher effect, that I walk over to the table and they stop talking. And I say it's one of my many superpowers, that I can make them stop talking when the teacher shows up. But I think you've got to give them the area and the elements to be able to interact with each other without making it forced. Because when you make it forced, that's when it goes off the rails type thing. But chalk markers, it's cheap. You can get them really cheap, and students love them, and it's easy to clean up.
Ginger.
So I think I have activities for each specific class that relate to that. That's kind of an icebreaker. But one of the just generic activities that I've done a lot is, of course, this was pre-COVID, but it was an activity called Pass the Penny, where everyone takes a penny and they pass it left or right when you're reading a story about a family who's going on a trip. But it gets them up, it gets them moving. They're, they form a circle. There's a connection that they have there. They find it humorous and laugh and cut up. And it's just a time for them to kind of, not have to be serious in that moment of first coming in that first day, and just gets everyone to kind of bond before we, kind of go around and get started.
Jennifer.
Yes, same too. Just some type of activity in class, and again, depending on your subject area, it would vary. But if there's some type of activity, some type of problem-solving activity, use the internet, folks, it's okay, or steal from your colleagues their ideas and things too. And get them talking to one another first. And that's one of the quickest ways. If they can engage with each other early on in the semester, you'll find that will continue to carry on throughout the remainder of the semester as well. Again, it's time and opportunity for those to happen, though.
Yeah, there's a lot of activities that you can look at as just icebreakers that might get a class started.
Yep.
We do a lot of those in ACA classes. We have one where we make the entire class stand on a tarp, and their goal is to get the tarp on the other side, but they cannot step off of the tarp. And so getting them to talk and brainstorm, especially in science, we make them act out protein synthesis, we make them act out muscle contractions, we make them act out all kinds of things. Partly for our own fun, but also for them to learn something too. Okay.
We had a question in the chat box, going back to what Jessica said about having those hard conversations and letting them know that they're struggling. Summerlin says, any pointers on how to help the students see the situation realistically in those hard conversations? I often see them really believing they can do it when they really can't at the time.
The conversations are hard, especially for what I'm teaching right now, which is anatomy and physiology, which a lot of times is the first tough class that a student gets to before they go into the nursing program. And they wanted to be a nurse forever, and they are struggling mightily with this. And I think there's no cookie cutter answer, and it's where the relationship comes back in to knowing that particular student and knowing what their issues are. And then honestly, I lay their exams out, and I had this happen this past semester, and the student was making 30s and 40s, and we went through lots of study skills, and she went to the academic assistance center, and then there was not much improvement. And it was just a hard conversation when I finally asked her, do you think that you could walk into a nursing classroom and be prepared with what you have done right now? And here's the hard part. I had to stop talking because I then want to fill the silence, and I needed to let her lead herself to that realization that it was not working this particular semester. And just like Dr. Chapman said, she enjoyed my class so much this fall that she signed up, and she will be in my class on Monday night to take it again with me this spring. So we had a hard conversation. It was not the time, and we've changed a handful of things, and she knows that she has my support, hopefully coming back. But I had to let her get there herself. I couldn't force her there.
Well, I think we're about out of time, but hopefully you found today's session helpful in thinking about building relationships in the student-centered classroom. If you could please join me in thanking our panelists today. Thank you all very much for doing this. Also, I'll do a quick plug for Erin. We have other PD activities this week as part of our Welcome Back Week. Hope you'll take advantage of some of those as well. Again, thank you all for joining us here virtually or here, and have a good week. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was an honor. Happy to
Thank
me
you,
too.
Deborah.
Good luck this semester.
Thank you, guys.
We're working. Okay, so nothing said